Welcome back to Revelatorium, the podcast that comes around once a month, which is just about as often as I will be hosting some sort of social event for the next few months. I had a beloved crafternoon again. If you listen to my December episode, we did a snowflake making crafternoon. This time, 2 people from the last crafternoon just stepped up to support with the next one. And so we were able to do line-a-cut Valentines. So you can cut into linoleum and make your own stamp, basically. And then we had ink and people stamped little Valentine's cards and even the envelopes. And then we also had homemade champurrado, because if you listened, that's something I'll be taking. I have continued to take. I have taken almost every opportunity I've had to drink some. It's so nourishing and genuinely life-giving. It feels like nectar. And so one of my friends, it was literally just divine to be taught on FaceTime by her mom how to make it. And I just fucking love getting to know my friends' families. It's like so tender. And I was talking to someone about how unfortunate it is that a lot of people only allow like their romantic partner to meet their family. And it's only an important event for like and I'm already going off about relational hierarchies. But yeah, and like the things that we like quarantine or like sideline for like just specific people in our lives. And I am really grateful for like the friends that do introduce me to their families, because I love parents. I love charming parents. It's one of my favorite hobbies and occupations in this life. I think it's because I'm, again, just like so desperate for like intergenerational wisdom. I'm like any source, like, and I got to eat up her music taste and practice my Spanish. And it was just really indulgent in a non-luxurious way. And when you can find indulgences that aren't hyper commodified and like, you know, it's not, what's that resort that people go to in Utah or like northern Arizona? Like Amangiri. Indulgences that aren't Amangiri. We've all been convinced that we need to be going to, maybe not all, but a certain sector of us that absorb lifestyle girly propaganda. That might be our understanding of luxury. But this was like a very beautiful, indulgent activity. So we had non-dairy and dairy champurrado. And then the question was, well, actually it worked out perfectly, because one of my other friends gave me the idea to do a mug swap, because I've been talking about like basically commodity fetishization, and like how often like one of our hobbies genuinely is just like shopping and buying things. And like we have been convinced that that is like a noble activity, and it's a hard line to draw of like what is personal style and like what is just rampant consumerism. But I know that I love buying work from ceramicists. I love ceramic art. I think it's so lovely. I love clay. I love natural fibers. Like that's always something I love to have in my home. I love to have a lot of wood, and I have been just trying to like reject this synthetic as much as I can. Although I do think I am getting like weirdly, is anyone else like weirdly perfectionistic about like natural? Like I want my life to happen at like a natural pace. Like I don't want things to happen inorganically or like forced or like synthetic. And it's even coming to the point where like, I talked a lot about last episode, like pixels. I'm like, those don't feel organic or natural. So I fear that I am sort of teetering into like an extremist position with like natural things. But anyway, I love mugs. I'm never going to be ashamed of that. Okay? What a beautiful vessel. And that's what you need to drink champurrado out of. And my dear friend gave me a beautiful Mexican mug to drink it with, and it made it so much more like, you know, delectable. So, but the thing is, I'm looking at my mug cabinet. I don't need any more mugs. I have like easily a dozen, and it's like I'm a single person living alone. If I were living in co-housing, communal housing, like it would make sense to have more mugs. But I don't need any more than that. And yet I still desire for mugs. I still want for mugs. I still yearn for, I want to buy more, but I also recognize within me that I'm like, I've hit capacity. we've hit quota. So what am I going to do if I still want new things? Oh, that's why we do swaps. That's why swaps happen. That's why the gift economy, that's why exchanging can be so beautiful, because like literally we have enough. Like there is so much food waste. There is so much housing that is available and just not used. Like we need to be like genuinely like making use of things. Like that is like part of my politic, is like I don't like things to go to waste. And that sounds ridiculous, but it's just like, even in terms of like, I don't like things to go to waste in terms of I own them and they barely get touched. I'm like, utility is like really important to me. And like usufruct, which was like a concept I introduced on a past episode, is important to me. Like using things, lending things, borrowing things, is precious. It's also empowering to know that like, if you've built relationships, like you can support each other in that way, and you might not need to want for more. Like you can fulfill your desire with like not you purchasing off of Amazon or like Etsy, but you can fulfill your desires off of like the work and effort you've put into your human relationships. Like that's free. That's literally free. And so the mug swap idea was born because it's like, okay, is there a mug here that I can part with in the gesture of receiving one that's going to inspire me? You know, it's like I put on the invite, which I did again, not handmade, but printed little posters that I designed. And it's very sweet because in this month I have received 2 hand printed. I don't know, like homemade. I don't know what the word would be, but anyway, bespoke, non-partyful invitations. And it's like so fun to have that on my fridge and get to like, every time I go to fill up my Hydro Flask, I get to see the events I have coming up. And it's almost like a little calendar of events on my fridge. Very darling, very sweet. The movement's building. Join us. That's why I'm here, to spread knowledge, if you so choose to accept it. Wouldn't you know, you have to be in a state of acceptance if you are open-minded and want to heed the suggestion. I think everyone should try it at least once and just see how you like it. It was really amazing this time around to build relationships with an event. I'll get back to the mug swap. Hopefully we'll get back to the mug swap. You never know on Revelatorium what we'll get back to. But if I don't get back to something, you guys can get back to it in the comment section. That's always a great place to do that on YouTube. There's also Spotify comments. Wouldn't you know it? But it was really beautiful to like see how I could build relationships through an event and hosting an event that is open. Because like one event that I'm taking this month is a severance watch party. And now we have 2 things to get back to, but the severance watch party, like that is a weekly event. So it's like, I'm totally hosting at least one event every single month, because it's like, that's like a small event. It's like the first one I found one friend and then another friend. So it was the 3 of us Friday night hunkered down to watch. We endeavored to watch. And then the next week, 4 people. And then the next week it was, actually the first week it was, anyway, it was either 3, 4, and then 7, or 4 or 5 and then 8. I don't even know. But anyway, like it feels like it's slow, beautiful, natural growth, because it's all just like word of mouth of like, hey, you watching this? Come. Like there's a watch party that happens every Friday. Like come to this. And like, I've always wanted to have like a standing hang. And we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about so many articles this month, because on my Patreon book club, I do a lot of like, and I've done 2 sets of anthologies these past few months, and this month we're doing a book, which if you're listening to this, it's not too late to join. We're reading a book called On Community by Casey Plett, which is a collection of sort of essays and musings about like the limitations of community, what community can provide for. Like I'm hoping that Casey Plett talks about what's like, what can be liberatory about community and what's not inherently like, uplifting or like radical or like revolutionary? Like because like I feel like we're hearing a lot about community being like the end all be all like savior of our world, but I'm like, no, the only thing that is going to save us is revolutionary struggle. That's my politic, is that we can't just like all have beloved communities and then oppression is over, because that's coming from systems of hierarchy and domination. And those systems of hierarchy and domination do also affect the way we treat each other in community. So it's all connected. But anyway, we're reading that book. So if you want to join that. Anyway, the book club is like literally beloved. It's on Zoom. It's like so wonderful. That technically is like another event I host every month as well. But there's not a set time for the book club. I schedule it based on people's availability. Anyway, it's nice to have the set time for the Severance watch party, because I think that has allowed it to grow, because it's like a reliable ritualistic thing. It's like Casey Neistat used to put out vlogs like every day at like 9 a.m. Pacific maybe, or like 9 a.m. Eastern. I don't remember. And so it's like, you knew if you wanted to eat breakfast every day and watch a video, like you would have that available. But I'm not looking to end my relationship with media. Like you're like, whoa, how'd you get there? I have been thinking about how to like pull away more from like parasocial dynamics and like how to involve more people in my life and create more space for that. Cause sometimes it feels like there's not enough space. There's not enough time in the week, but I'm like, if Severance is a thing I'm already going to be watching, why not just have people over and make an event out of it? And like, I was reading an article about how we've become, more antisocial than ever and the things that contribute to it. And I'd like to, maybe I'll just read that now, because that's natural and flowing. So you have like, this just comes up. I'm like, okay, what are the hazards of being obsessed with all things natural? Okay. I'm going to have to link all these articles in the show notes, because I basically just screenshot and crop quotes from articles and save them to my folder of preoccupations, because I will be talking in conversation and reference these, and I actually don't want to misquote anything, because I revere authors so much that I'm like, what you've written has so much integrity, I don't even want to paraphrase it. But anyway, this author wrote that eroding companionship can be seen in numerous odd and depressing facts of American life today. Men who watch television now spend 7 hours in front of the TV for every hour they spend hanging out with somebody outside their home. Television transformed Americans. This is this person's theory, right? And they're finding data to support it. Sometimes with these Atlantic articles or, the Cut or not, the data just doesn't sound right. Like the data was like only 4% of people in the US went to a party or a social gathering on any given weekend in 2023. I'm like, that just sounds way too low. Like there's no way. I'm like, what? That just, either I am living in like the tail of the bell curve at the top, where like everyone I know is like going to social gatherings every weekend, or we're actually cooked. So anyway, they also wrote, television transformed Americans' interior decorating, our relationships, and our communities. In 1970, just 6% of sixth graders had a TV set in their bedroom. In 1999, that proportion had grown to 77%. I'm like, I didn't, 77% of my friends did not have a TV in their bedroom growing up. There was like a minority of them I found. Maybe that's just my little Bay Area liberal bubble, and parents were like, no, I'm nuking that. Like, I'm not doing that. I don't know. But like that proved that, it's like sometimes you find data and it proves your point. And lately I've been finding that a lot of authors find data that like makes me more suspicious of their point, because the data just seems so flagrant. I'm like, huh? Anyway, Time diaries in the 1990s showed that husbands and wives spent almost 4 times as many hours watching TV together as they spent talking to each other in a given week. People who said TV was their primary form of entertainment were less likely to engage in practically every social activity that the researcher counted. Volunteering, church going, attending dinner parties, picnicking, giving blood, even sending greeting cards. Like a murder in Clue, the death of social connections in America had any number of suspects. But in the end, I believe the likeliest culprit is obvious. It was Mr. Farnsworth in the living room with the tube. That is the inventor of the tube, the telly, whatever you want to call it. So this is very harrowing, especially as someone who grew up in a TV dinner household. And this is like a bit that I do on stage and stand-up, is like clap if you grew up eating, clap if you grew up eating dinner around the dining room table with your family. And like, there's a smattering of applause, like, you know, some. And then I'm like, okay, where the rest of you eat dinner? And then there's a little bit of silence. And then last time I did, a couple people were like, TV. And I thought it was amazing that there wasn't even a full sentence. It was just TV. And I was like, totally. I knew that's what you were going to say. That's the only other option. Unless it's like alone in your room, you all ate like alone in your room. And I did that every night with my family. And I thought it was beloved because I was like, I love watching Emily Deschanel tear it up on Bones every night. Like, she's amazing. I love looking at her face and her voice, honestly. And then the other guy in that show turned out to be a monster. So, and I loved watching Project Runway, and I love watching TV with my mom, especially reality TV. Like, I loved watching My Life on the D-List with Kathy Griffin. I loved watching Malcolm in the Middle. I loved watching Desperate Housewives with my mom. I loved like participating in media with her and doing the commentary with her. And I loved getting to know her taste. And there is something intimate about that. And it held us back from really discussing our inner lives, our thoughts, what was happening in our weeks. Like, where's the space for that? What space are you making for that if like so much of your time after work and after school is like spent in front of the TV? I would even do my homework in front of the TV. Like, I was always and usually if you're watching the video right now, my TV is right here where my hand is. My dad is, swaggy with his technology, and he introduced the swivel arm to me. So I did have them install that because it was a part of my lease. And when something is afforded to you as a part of your lease, that is so rare and you have to take advantage of it. So I was like, please mount this for me. It is in my lease. And honestly, no one else read their lease because the guy was like, it is? Okay. I don't think many people use the service, but I do. It's because my neighbors, a lot of them haven't mounted their TVs. They have like a little thing they put it on top of. And honestly, I wish I had gotten a little rolly cart. It was too late. Like, by the time I found my friend sent me one, I'd already mounted it, and I was like, well, fuck it. And something within me is like, I'm gonna get mine. Like, if I can get this for free, then I'm gonna get it. So anyway, my TV's mounted now. But it's not the centerpiece of my living room. It's off to the side. And it's interesting because all of my neighbors' apartments that I've seen, or no, not all of them, but most of them, they also have perched it to the side, because it's like, you don't want that to be the expectation that when people come over, that's what we'll be doing. And I also think it's very, maybe not chic, but like, ambiance driven to put like a little something on the TV. Like, maybe, let me put you on, because someone on my zine team also got recommended this person's videos. Anne Pfaff, Annepfaff, I think that is her name. Every time I think about what her channel name is, it changes and morphs in my head. But she has been putting together basically just like mixes, and then she'll put like a photo to like every song. I don't know if it's just the album cover or not. Anyway, it's like a nice little, vibey thing to put on. You could do a little generator or fireplace. You can do some other little generator, just something, something there that like, so that the TV's not this like black pit that like sucks you in and you feel like you should be using it. And ultimately I would like to get rid of a TV, but I am someone that's like, TV, like, I appreciate good TV. And I watched, God, what video did I watch that was talking about, maybe it was Brody Deschanel. Love her work. Let me put you on to someone else if you're not already a viewer. And she was talking about, it was Dennis Villeneuve. Villeneuve? I don't know. Why do I want to say Villeneuve? Hit the thumbs up if you know it. but the director of Dune, like, I think he had sort of looked down on like TV as like really eroding film and like that category, and like TV was like a debasement. In the same way that like maybe YouTube is seen as a debasement of TV. Like we keep coming up with new forms of media that like people view as less like worthy or holy or like rich or whatever. But when I'm watching Severance, bringing it back to the watch party, like it is such a divinely crafted show. It's the attention to detail is remarkable. It is so stunning visually, like aesthetically driven. Like it is proficiently acted. Like just everything about it, I really am just like compelled by. And so I'm like, this is not something I want to experience privately. This is something I want to experience communally with other people that get it. Because if we're going to be watching TV, let's at least use it as a touch point to get people together. And when I have the watch party, there's a before and there's an afters. There's a befores and there's an afters. There's a little like everyone gathers, people get here at different times. So I get to have like a little one-on-one with so-and-so, and then the other people get here and I get some time with them. And then maybe they stay late, the other person leaves. And it's like, you know, we're setting up the snacks, people bring stuff over, I'm like making tea, and it's like we're kind of talking about what's going on, and then we eventually get into the show. We're pausing the show every 8 to 12 minutes. I know some people fucking hate that shit, but I'm like, I am here to have thoughtful, intellectual discussion. I already told you guys, Mercury and Aquarius, I'm watching TV for the intellectual exercise of like analyzing it. And like that Severance is a show that like wants you to do that. And it's like, it's one thing to watch a movie or TV show and then immediately go on YouTube or Reddit or whatever and look up like every fact and like secret about it. And I do like seeing memes, and I like watching interviews, and I'm totally like all of that. And also I think some of that desire is, if you're watching it alone, you want to like feel connected, or like, you know, that your experience of the show has like a bigger sphere to it. And so I'm like, why not just have that sphere be like in my living room and touchable, where I'm like, oh, this sphere is like warm and like awesome and like soft and great, instead of digital and like pixelated and Xenon Z3. So I will be taking Severance watch parties with me. It's been a really joyous part of my winter. And like, I'm not sending out invitations to this, but it is just nice that I'm like, I've gotten new people into my living room every week because of it, because it's just kind of like, oh, if someone from the club, at the watch club, meets somebody, it's like, oh, come through. And just weekly is nice. Book club is once a month. Watch party once a week. Let's fucking go. But you can only do that when a show does appointment viewing, and we're losing shows that do appointment viewing. Like White Lotus is coming back out. I don't know that I want to have a watch party for that. I don't know. But Severance, certainly. But besides those more sort of like cyclical, just like repeatable events, like a series of, oh, actually I do want to do like my Crafternoon like is going to be a series like in the summer. Maybe I won't give it away, actually. Maybe I won't give it away. I'll talk about them as I have them, but I have a list of ideas. Like it's very, anytime I have a list of ideas, I'm like, oh, this must be creative. Like I have a list of ideas for videos. I have a list of ideas for like when I was making TikToks, like I have a list of event ideas, like gathering ideas. And like, I love the creativity of an event. And I think something we've lost by using things like Partyful is like the creativity of the invitation, and seeing that as a part of the elegance and like bespoke, you know, unique to you influence of the event. And seeing how that can land with somebody, and seeing how that can make an impression on someone, actually, because I was in an event. I've met new people this winter. I'm so happy. Meeting new people like keeps life fresh. It keeps you renewed. It keeps you inspired. Like I'm so inspired by people. And I just read this Substack essay from Tracy Clark Flory. I like her. And she was talking about a few new books about like desire and relationships and romance. If those are things you like, you'll probably like her Substack. She was talking about this new book about strangers. Someone Betancourt wrote it. I'll try to think about putting it in the show notes, but ask me in the comments if I forget. Anyway, and one of the quotes that, I have it in my folder right here. See how convenient it is to have it in my folder. They said, the very concept of a stranger is troubled by Betancourt's experiences with ephemeral intimacies that in some ways offer up an authenticity and freedom that he found lacking in long-term relationships. He writes, a stranger can offer us the chance to see ourselves anew, to imagine a different way of moving through the world. Every chance encounter I've come to find can be a chance to remake yourself. The unguarded intimacy that's nurtured in moments when we meet strangers we're enthralled with offers infinite possibilities to be better versions of ourselves, but also maybe to be and project the person we've always known ourselves to be. And that's so beautiful as someone who's like, I feel like my interests and like the way I put myself together is so fluid and like so shifting all the time that it's like, it can be really affirming to meet someone new and not have like, and to not have like their deeper knowledge of you, like their past knowledge of you, like influence the way that you interact with that person. And I think I've been so lucky. I just had a friend from middle school visit me, and it's like so beautiful to have someone embrace you in so many shifting phases of your life. Like I know we all know that to be true. Like there is so much beauty in like a long-term relationship, but I think it can be really freeing to meet someone new, like to talk with a stranger. And like, and I think I spoke to that on, maybe it was last month when I talked about the stranger I walked 5 blocks with, I have not seen since. And I'm like, still just so like, you know, touched by that experience. It was really inspiring and like, yeah, you can live any which type of way and someone can influence you do that. Anyway, I went to this beautiful event, and I met a couple new people there, and when I meet someone new, it's always like, do I want to like lock it down? I'm not doing Instagram exchanges anymore, but I'm like, do I want to lock it down in terms of, do I want to get your phone number? And do we want to like, because it's like every new relationship, like I want to have enough space and like have enough time to build relationships. And sometimes that can feel overwhelming because I'm like, oh my God, like I'm actually getting to a triumphant point in the construction of my social life in Seattle, because it was literally a construction project. Like I've been building, and now I'm at a point where I'm like, the project, like the architecture of my social life here has been built, and actually it's like way bigger than I thought. Like all the rooms have been made and like they're filled now. I'm like, whoa, it's like my social life feels fully furnished, and I'm like, do I have room for another mug? Literally. I'm like, do I have room in the cabinet? Am I actually going to be able to use the mug? Am I actually going to be able to drink? Am I going to reach for the mug? Am I going to experience the same pleasure I experienced from the other mugs? You see all this, you know, this internalizing of this and these like, you know, the conflict I have around it is like, I hate to bring Tim Ferriss into this. There is, you know what? There is some wisdom he holds, okay? And just because I've left tech influencers behind doesn't mean I can't still appreciate when they're like, you know, there are cathedrals everywhere for those with eyes to see. You know that was Jordan Peterson, right? But that's a profound quote I love using. So,
cutting myself off to bring in the admission that I now know the last however many minutes of audio were only captured from my iPhone, which is 6 feet away from me. And though I project with the force of a college tour guide, I don't think the quality was at the standard I've previously set. But it's kind of a miracle that in 26 episodes, I have only encountered this once. Usually, and here's what I'll say, is anybody that's starting out making any sort of media, you're going to have issues and technical difficulties, and that doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. That's just a part of the process. We all experience it. Every fucking YouTuber knows when your mic's not working or the footage is corrupted or whatever. It like ruins your day, but it's like your ability to stay in the craft is your ability to overcome those obstacles. And here I am. I refuse to re-talk about what I just talked about because it was natural and free flowing. And so hopefully I can salvage that in post. Anyway, I was talking about Tim Ferriss and the tech influencer and there are cathedrals everywhere. I am so, basically one thing that Tim Ferriss, he's like in his 40s now. And like one of the top pieces of advice that I happened to glean from him last year in like some short YouTube video was like, he feels like it's been more advantageous to pour his social life and his free time into like his 5 or 10 like most treasured relationships rather than trying to spread himself thin across a bunch of people. And I think that's very personal to you and sort of like your energetic stylings of your social life. But I've been considering that. Like, I'm not saying I'm like adopting that, but I've been considering that. It's like, do I want to stick to the people that I know? And I think the answer is no. I think I need to keep meeting strangers, but it's like, do I want to make this stranger a reoccurring appearance in my life and have them not be a stranger anymore? So I, instead of like reaching out to get each other's numbers or each other's Instagrams, no phone exchange at all. I was like, the swag of, in my tote bag, I brought with me 3 printed invites to my gathering happening the next day. I was like, what an opportunity to literally hand deliver to a stranger an invitation to come over to my house. And not everybody would be that, like, I am very trusting and I'm trying to reject our fear of each other and trying to embrace people because I'm like, the real violence and the real harm is institutional. And like, I want to like allow people to begin with trust and to allow people into my life. And then if they prove themselves to be untrustworthy, then deal with that at that point. But go into relationships in good faith. And so I handed the invites to these 2 people and they were like, at first they were like, what is this? Is this like a flyer for something? And then they were like, oh, you made this, like, this is your personal thing. And I was like, yeah, like, I would love for you guys to come if you could make it. And one person was like, can I bring my partner? I was like, for sure. So it's like, now I'm literally just like, +1 of a +1. But here's the thing is like, I have to allow +1s of +1s at my parties because I love to be a +1 of a +1, of a +1. If you watch the Jane Wicklin sketch, oh my God, I'm so obsessed with Jane Wicklin. Like literally, Wickline, I don't know, she fucking gets it. Like literally gets me down. We came up with this same comedy bit about being tall and it being like dogs and the smaller ones living longer. And so when you're tall, it's like, I'm not going to live that long. We had the same joke about that. And I was like, that's amazing. I love sharing comedy with them. And I do feel like I want to use they, them pronouns for Jane. Anyway, I feel like we do actually, like we inhabit the same like gender. So anyway, whatever. So I was like, okay, let's see. This is like a friendship test. It's like, okay, let's see. Like, because I think like for me, like one of the main qualities that I really appreciate in a friend is someone who will show up and not just, flake on you all the time, not just say we should hang out and not come through. Like I want people who are really warm and like embrace me and like want to spend time and like will put in that and will initiate So I was like, what better way to like at the outset of this like interaction or like the beginning of this relationship with this person, like see like, is this something that they can show up at? And of course, we all live busy, occupied lives, hopefully by like so many, worthwhile endeavors. But I was like, let's just see. And they both were able to go. And then the next day at the craft afternoon, I was like, let's see. And they both pulled up. And I was like, okay, amazing. I need to try this more often. But like having a gathering like once a month, like I had one in February. I'm planning one for March, and then I'm going to have one in April too. That's like the full series that I have like in my mind right now. The March, April won't be craft afternoons, but like we'll see who wants to come to those ones that are themed a little bit differently that you'll have to listen to the pod to hear about. I did end up getting the phone. One of the people did end up getting my phone number just because it's like, it is kind of a little like you're kind of adrift if you have an invite and you have my address but you don't have my phone number, because it's like, what if you rang my doorbell and I didn't let you? It's like you do still kind of need that connection, that phone number. But like, imagine if I could have friendships where we didn't have each other's phone numbers. I could have that with my neighbors because we could just knock on each other's doors. Like that could work. But I'm like, that would be like literally living like the 1940s. Like, how the hell were they doing it? How the hell were they how the hell were they getting together? I want to know. And that's what I would have to talk to someone who's 90 plus years old if they were like in their teens or 20s. Like, how are you doing it back then? So if you're listening and you have someone in that age range, you can ask, like, how were you planning to get together on a Friday? How many days in advance would you have to do that if you didn't have each other's phones? Okay. So it was such an amazing, just like reorientation of my social life where I'm like, oh, like I'm literally going brick and mortar, analog, acoustic, Amish style, but we still did get each other's phone numbers. And then the other person I met because they were a friend of a friend. And so then I was like, okay, well, when you meet someone that's a friend of a friend, sometimes I'm not like jumping to get their phone number at the first opportunity, because I'm like, oh, if it's meant to be, it'll be. Like, I'll see you again. And if I want to see you again, I can just ask my friend to like set up a group hang, or I could just get your number from that friend. Like, I don't have to decide like right now in this moment if like this is like a stranger that I want to like invite into my life more. And it's really uncanny that I'm in this position now, because when I first moved to Seattle, I was so desperate for connection that like I didn't even give myself the opportunity to like be more intentional about like, okay, like, do I have the space and time to like pour into this relationship? Because it feels shitty when someone wants to spend time with you and you don't have time, because you're like, I'm booked. Like I'm booked, and I'm soon to be booked Sunday. So I'm soon to be booked Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday nights. So it's like, if I already have stuff Thursday, and then I actually have the watch party Friday night. So it's like, I kind of just have like Thursday and Saturday. It's like, how many new relationships can I like fill, So, I've found that instead of scheduling a one-on-one hang and a series of one-on-one hangs to get to know this person, I'm like, what if I could I have a standing party come through, and it's not deep, intimate time to get to know me, but it is just kind of like, okay, that is a touch point, and that is a way to invite you into my life in a way that like is abundant. Like, it doesn't feel like I have a capacity. In this most recent afternoon, I got to experience a new problem of what is the maximum number of people I can fit in here, because we had, it was kind of, I was hosting it with these two supporting actors, and then they invited some people. Some of my friends invited some people. My policy is bring anyone that's a good hang along, which requires the people that I invite to have, a similar vision of what a good hang means. So it's depending on that. But, nobody was there that torpedoed and tanked the event. So thank God for that. But I was like, what's the maximum number of people I can have in here? Because I'm not collecting RSVPs when I hand out a physical invite or I text the flyer out to people. So I was like, any number of people could come. But the thing is, even if you have a party full and you get the RSVPs, it's not going to be 100% of those people that come through anyway. So it's still a mystery how many people will come through. So I just had like extra snacks and like extra line of cut carving tools on hand. And then I realized you can make returns to grocery stores. So I like returned my extra guac and goat cheese and chips and crackers. And I was like, that's amazing. So it's kind of like, okay, well, I don't have to feel so scarce and so stressed about it if like those extras, like that preparation I can be exalted. So I am like very, very glad. I'm like, it would be even better if I had the invitation for my next gathering ready at the previous gathering. Because then as people left, I could just be like, oh, here's the next one if you can make it. I'm like, one of the things I want to do in 2025 is like get my swag up. I'm like, I want to get my swag up. And like, I posted this photo on Twitter the other day of like I took a photo in the mirror on the street and I was like, this looks like Anthony Bourdain. And I'm like, that's a very swaggy individual. Like, if I'm thinking about, gender envy, I got some for him. I got some for Heath Ledger. I got some for, honestly, 5-year-old boys have a very youthful swagger to them, appreciate what they're doing. And I had amazing interaction with a 5-year-old the other week, again, talking about rejecting our fear of each other, my heart was so warm to know that I could strike up a conversation with a 5-year-old while we were both waiting for our friends and family to get out of the bathroom. And I was like, I think a lot of times I would assume that I'm not allowed to talk to a 5-year-old if they're alone and I'm alone, because then I'm like this creepy adult. But when his mom came out of the bathroom, she was not afraid of me either. She was just like, clearly we're chopping it the fuck up. But the problem is, and I will admit this to you guys, if you promise to treat me in good faith, because everything, and that's the thing is like, I think I forgot to put the guidelines on this channel. Let me check. But I was talking to my friends the other night about how like what my audience looks like as compared to like other YouTube audiences or other podcast audiences. Podcast audiences are way harder to get to know, because usually if you're listening on a podcast app, like you're not going to know what their speed, style, communication preferences are. Anyway, on my YouTube channel, I have like community guidelines for like my comment section. So I'm like, engage in good faith, like acknowledge that there's context and nuance you're not aware of, like be gentle. And genuinely, because my videos don't go viral and they're not pushed out to people who, you know, aren't like regular contributors to the space, I feel like people do abide by those. And it also gives me the like sort of I was going to say authority. I guess it is authority to like, if someone leaves a comment that's not following that, I'm like, I could delete it. I usually don't delete comments because I'm just like, if I delete that one, like I'm sure someone else had the same thought and like I want to allow a forum to happen. But if it's something like so obscene, like I don't really see a use for that. But anyway, but the way that I started this conversation with the 5-year-old was I went, well, first of all, the way they started the conversation was by not looking at my phone. And I think rejecting that impulse can open up your life to so much more like interaction, like I want to say longevity. Like it feels like, but that's not the right word at all. But for some reason, it just feels like, and maybe it is longevity because it's like that, and it is. I love Freudian slips. I'm like, there's a fucking reason that wanted to come out of my mouth. The reason it feels like more longevity is like that interaction with that 5-year-old probably wasn't 5, probably was like 7. I don't know ages of kids because I'm not getting enough intergenerational relationships the other way either. That interaction has stayed with me. I've probably told 12 people about it just as I like meet and greet with my friends over the past week since it's happened. And yet if I had spent those 5 minutes, because it probably was like 3 minutes, honestly. If I'd spent those 3 minutes on Twitter, the longevity of those 3 minutes would have expired by now. Like those 3 minutes on Twitter would not probably follow me. Every once in a while you will see something on social media, or like if I'm reading an essay on Substack, that has longevity. Thinking about like what I spend time on, not that it all needs to have like a lasting impact, but like what are ways I can spend my time in more like significant contributing ways rather than things that are like just so almost like they just end up waste. Like it's just like, it just becomes waste and it doesn't like exist in my world. I'm like, it's wonderful when I can bring like new exciting things into the fold and honestly like make bids for connection. So I made a bid for connection. And the way I did that for some reason, I was like a little stoned, but I was like, you're so independent. Like I tried to give a compliment where I was like, you're so independent. And then I finished that phrase or that claim with, out here all on your own. And then as soon as it came out of my mouth, I was like, oh, I've just condemned myself. Like he's not going to want to talk to me. But then you know what? He kind of did mumble something. He was kind of like, I'm going to scam. And then I was just kind of like, I can't hear you. Because, and this was like a realization I came to when I told this story. This is the power of me test running these things in my social life before I bring them on the pod, is that like the dialectic push and pull of like me saying this to someone live and them responding to it is like, it enriches the story, because now I'm like, okay, when I told them that I said I couldn't hear you, they were like, yeah, sometimes kids are just, you know, maybe he needed to learn that lesson. And I was like, you know what? I know you're joking, but I think like we actually do need to be told that we're audible, because I am someone who I'm like hyper audible. Like I feel like I'm talking so loud. But sometimes it feels like I'm doing that because it's like, it's generous for someone to be able, for there to be clarity and someone not have to spend extra effort to like piece together what you're saying because they can't hear you. Like, obviously when you're on Zoom and like you cannot hear someone's audio because it's muted or like their microphone is muffled, it's like, it's charitable to be like, hey, we can't hear you. It's not like you're doing something wrong. It's just like, oh, we want to hear you. That's why we're telling you we can't hear you. So I was thinking about it because I was talking about soft-spoken people, and like it's sort of an issue if you're too soft-spoken, because there's some people that are so soft-spoken, like you have to keep going, what? And it's like, it takes effort to push my voice out of my vocal cords. And if you're not spending that effort reciprocally and you're making other people spend the effort of like having to like always ask what you're saying, those relationships are going to be more laborious and like more difficult, you know? So it's like, if I can introduce to him now that you've got to have some, and I'm someone who slurs all my words together. I have terrible enunciation. Actually, maybe I don't. Maybe my mom was just like so militant about that, but this kid, I let him know I can't hear you. And then he spoke up and I could. So amazing exchange. And he was just like, yeah, I have been going to the grocery store alone. And I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. Like, how far is the grocery store? And then I was like, it's so fun to queen out with an elementary schooler and to interact with him in the same way that I would interact with like an adult stranger, like being inquisitive and like encouraging. And I'm not being like, oh my God, like, it's kind of just like, I'm giving a compliment. And then I'm like, in the same way that I gave the stranger on the street the compliment of like, I love your outfit. And then we just like started talking, like the improvisational quality of that. Anyway, amazing time with my young friend there. A litany of light-filled interactions in the dark winter can save you, but you have to reject your fear of each other, and you have to reject your interest in your phone, or also your like that you have to accept that your phone's a liability in those interactions, and that you're never going to like reap the social benefit of like leaning into somebody if you're leaning into your phone instead. But let me actually read this quote. This is from Miriam Kaba and Kelly. Ooh, can't remember. But anyway, this is just a brief start to the essay. It's called Rejecting Our Fear of Each Other on inquest.org. And they said, when people comply with an action or tolerate a situation they know is harmful or wrong, fear is often a factor. Fear of punishment, of the unknown, of one another often prevents us from protecting and connecting with each other. Powerful actors must keep us convinced that it's the people around us, everyday folks whose struggles overlap with our own, who pose the greatest threat to our safety, well-being, and happiness. It is the grandest illusion ever created. In a world where corporations and world governments are poised to annihilate most life on Earth, we are made to believe that other disempowered people are the greatest danger we face. Of course, many of us know this is not true, at least intellectually. We know that the military-industrial complex, it continues to go on. But that's been something I've really been centering on this past month. Oh my God, wait, I remember how I got to the 5-year-old boys, because I was talking about getting my swag up. And technically, getting my swag up belongs in the next podcast episode based on the Gregorian calendar of like that. I don't know, whatever. It's like I'm coming to my January Revelatorium late, and so it's kind of bleeding into February, but like we're getting to a point where I'm just going to do everything that I haven't talked about since the last one. And if my month goes from January 16th to February 14th, and then the next month goes from February 15th to March 8th, that's just actually the way that life actually feels and the way that time actually passes, and like chronological time doesn't make sense to me. I'm on Kairos time. If anyone's read Saving Time by Jenny Odell, like really took me a while to grasp that concept, because she writes kind of academically in a way that like it's like hard to interface with, but Kairos time is like, oh, I'm noticing that there's like, this week I've been walking around and I'm seeing buds on trees. I'm seeing the daffodils start to sprout up from the ground. And I'm like, I can recognize the phase of time that we're going into, but I'm not like, it's not like so clear cut that it's like, oh, it's February 10th because I'm seeing this. Because last year I actually saw on my phone, I saw a sea of crocuses outside this one house on February 10th. But this year my friend said, oh, I haven't seen them yet. And I'm like, okay, great. Like time is not fixed. Anyway, getting my swag up. I don't exactly know how to achieve this. All I know is that like I have my swag mentors and I've been thinking about who in my life, you know what? Fuck it. I am going to save this for next month because I didn't get to ask this in this month's survey. And I want to ask you guys about who in your life, who's the first person in your life that you, if I ask you like who has swag that you go to and like what about them is swaggy. So we're going to stick to that. So percolate on that. And maybe even when you're listening to this, I'll have the next month's survey out and you can fill out right away. Okay. Back to rejecting our fear of each other. That really came into being in a good time in my life because I've been focusing and I've been cutting my teeth on relational organizing a lot right now. I am like more or less organizing my neighbors into an association of tenants. Like we're literally trying to associate more with each other. Like sometimes rejecting our fear of each other is not like becoming besties, becoming lovers, becoming comrades. Sometimes it's just associating and like acknowledging each other in the hallways and like helping each other out when something's afoot. Loaning each other something is an association of each other. And so me and my neighbor canvassed door to door, and we made a little flyer with a QR code that went to a Google form so people could put their contact info in so that we could create a spreadsheet of everyone's info, of things they want to work on in the building, issues they're having, things that they want to be in contact with each other about. And then we can have an email thread and a text thread. And we got everyone's consent. And in going around and knocking on every door, I would say of the people that we knocked on, like 50% opened their door. And like the other 50%, probably most of them weren't home. So that makes sense. And so people opened their door, were willing to talk. And then we got like over 80%, I think, response level, maybe 85. And we were able to have our first couple building meetings. And I just feel like if you've been tapping in for a while into like my construction project of my social life, like befriending my neighbors was a really important thing for me. And when I first had my housewarming party here, my upstairs neighbor told me I'm the first one that had ever invited the whole building over for a party or over, period. And I'm like, that has to change. And I struggle because part of the culture of Seattle and the West Coast in general is like people are just like a little icier here. And people are not making eye contact with you on the street and like chatting you up like what they will in New Orleans. Like the culture's different here. And I'm like, as a transplant, I don't want to like come in here and be like, this shit's bad. I know better than you. But at the same time, I'm like, for our own longevity, thinking about system collapse, thinking about all of the, ICE raids, the evictions, the lack of funding, the collapse of our systems. It's like, we need to be looking out for each other and protecting each other. And so it's like, we can't stand to maintain that part of like Seattle culture. Like that's not like, there's no fortitude to that. It's futile. And so I've been gaining a lot of experience and like wisdom and like making mistakes of like how to relationally organize and like build one-on-one relationships and like how to reject our fear of each other more and how to encourage people to take initiative, how to encourage people to turn towards each other. Like and this is something I've gained a lot of skill set with as a facilitator of like political education classes in my free time, is like how to turn people gently with love instead of tell people you're wrong, I know better than you, I have authority on this. It's like, no. We are all here briefly. On earth, we're briefly gorgeous. On earth, we're briefly hysterical. On earth, we're briefly scared of each other. And I'm like, I don't know better. It's my first time here too. I just want to encourage people and cheerlead people and champion people that I believe in them. I have faith. And sometimes my faith is shaken. Like we had our first building meeting and only one person showed up, even though multiple people RSVP'd. And I was like, that sucks. But then I was like, let's just pivot our strategy and do more one-on-one outreach. And lo and behold, that yielded amazing dividends. And how did I figure that out? By calling my friend who's doing the same thing in Cleveland, who's working on housing cooperatives and, stuff like that in Cleveland. And so it's like, our relationships are some of our best teachers. Like, I learn literally so much. I learn so much from my friends, and like, it's such a renewable resource. It makes my life feel like I'm not strung out as much because I'm like, I know people who know things. I don't need to depend on like AI. I don't need to depend on Google or Reddit. It's like, if I can find people in my life, like I'm not dependent on things that could literally get shut down. Like, TikTok, thinking about that getting shut down. It's like, if that's your source of all your wisdom, like you need to divest. Like you need to divest, and you need to like put it in things that are more reliable. And certainly relationships can decay. But another thing I've been reading is about social promiscuity. And like how important it is to like not have your whole life dependent on like one person or one source of support, but like be promiscuous and like meet new people at events and then invite them to your parties. Like be, talking to strangers, like be, don't get everything locked down into one friend group, like really reach out. I'm just proselytizing. And, yeah, just to expound a bit on what I've learned from relational organizing is, as opposed to like digital organizing, right? As opposed to like organizing on like Instagram or like organizing on Signal or whatever, which like Signal is like relational to some extent. But anyway, I think a lot of like, it's like it took leadership for me and my neighbor to like initiate this and like propose the building meetings and go door to door and everything. But it's like, I don't want to get to a position where like we're the ones doing everything. And you don't have to spend much time thinking about it. If I asked you what position if I asked you what you thought in a group project I would be like, I know that I'm the fucking one that was like willing to stay late and work on the PowerPoint and like let people slack off because I was like controlling and like like the reality of it was like, I want a good grade and I know I care more about it than you probably do. And so I'm willing to put more work into it. And it's the same thing here. It's a group project. It's a construction project of like, I know that me and my neighbor care more about having this system of like knowing each other than the rest of the people here do. However, I want to encourage people to fold in and to gain skill set themselves. I don't want us to be the keepers of the skills and of the knowledge and of this system. Like I would love it even if we both moved out of the building, if what we built continued without us. And I've been a part of a political project now for going on 4 years where the people that started the project are no longer involved and yet it's still going. And I think that's such a sign of success and like true foundational support, that it's not reliant on something like so fragile like an app that could go away. And now I'm just going to read to you a lot of my revelations this month were born not out of conversations but out of reading essays and articles. And as I've been stepping away more from Instagram, let me just talk my shit now because I can feel it forming, is that I've recognized through this podcast, it just kind of clicked in my brain that like I've been complaining a lot about Instagram. Like I've been complaining a lot about it, but I haven't been, and I've been adjusting my technique with it and the way I approach it and being more intentional with it. But I just got to a point where I was like, if I'm so fed up with it and I'm finding all of these issues, why am I still on it? Like, why am I just like, oh, I hate this and I hate that, but like, I guess I'll just do this so I can withstand it. And I'm like, why do I need, it used to be like a really great place for me to share fucking photos. It used to be a photo sharing app. And then it got commodified into a marketplace. and into a vendor situation and into a place where you're seeing stuff from people you don't know more than people that you do know. And algorithms are telling people what parts of your social life and what parts of your everyday are more worth seeing. And it's like, that's just like, I'm sad that like I no longer can tap into that app in like a creative way. Like I still was able to find creative avenues and ways to use my Instagram story, but now I'm just like, the way that it's sort of like what is it called when calcified? Like I feel like Instagram has calcified the way we organize our social lives, and it's creating like it's not allowing us to be as creative with like how we interact and how we get to know each other. Like it's just so obvious. It's like you meet someone and then you get to know them when you hang out and through their Instagram story. And I'm like, I don't think I want people to get, I clearly, if you've been listening the past few episodes, do not want people to get to know me through my social media. And yet I'm here. And that's the contradiction of it. And yet I'm recording this public podcast that anyone can tap into. But I feel like not everyone I meet on the street is going to want to listen to a full podcast. And not everyone's going to want to watch a YouTube video, because a lot of people don't watch YouTube videos. But Instagram is like such a low lift that like someone could really, really, really consume your life on there. And so I've decided that I'm going to experiment with leaving Instagram. I don't know exactly yet if that looks like deactivating, if that looks like just deleting the app and leaving it and just not posting or engaging with it. I will link a site that my comrade's friend built called leaveinsta.com with like some notes about it. But this is going to connect to another essay that I read. And I am going to make like a full YouTube video about it, because there's so much more that goes into it than this. So if you're like, this feels half-baked and incomplete, that's because it is. That's how it goes. This person wrote, unfortunately, much of our collective social life has been subsumed by Instagram. Many of us depend on it for work, fundraising, organizing, keeping in touch, staying in the loop, etc. For this reason, I don't fault or judge anyone for continuing to use the platform. But for those willing and able to try, leaving Instagram presents many opportunities. This is from leaveinsta.com, by the way. Meta is harvesting our data on a massive scale. You will see how much when you download your Instagram account information before deleting your account. Leaving their platforms is not enough to challenge the growing power of tech oligarchs. Only organizing and revolution can do that. But it does prevent them from directly accessing your data and profiting off your every action online. Being in voluntary exile from social media can be incredibly fruitful. It compels us to fundamentally rethink what it means to be social. We must represent ourselves and connect with our communities without ready-made templates for sociality provided by platforms like Instagram. These templates were always meant to constrain our imaginations, forcing us to squeeze the unruly togetherness of life into the mold of commodities and markets. Instead, let's embrace the supposed inconvenience of needing to socialize with intention. Every connection with our friends, family, comrades, and future comrades is an opportunity for creativity. We have neglected the care that is required to maintain relationships for too long. Hopefully, leaving Instagram will be one amongst many steps in our collective process of rebuilding our web of relations outside the frame of techno-capitalism. Let's not only reclaim our private lives, but our public ones too. And so this really captures like so much of what I'd been thinking about. And it was such a revelation to read someone like so like sophisticatedly like really represent those thoughts. And through relationally organizing with my neighbors, I've realized like if you know people down the hall, you don't need to know them on Instagram to hang out. You could use their phone number to hang out, so you're not just ambushing them with a knock on the door. But I've gotten to the point where I've told my neighbors, like, if I'm home and if I'm not home, knock on my door. If I'm home, I'll answer. And if I can hang, if I can come play, then we can play. But like, if I can't, then I'll let you know. And like, just really being open. And these past few months, I've also, as I've met new people, refrained from following each other on Instagram. And I've noticed no discernible like negative impact that's had. I've been able to learn so much and get to know people in so many amazing ways. And like not having each other on Instagram, it feels a little funny because it's like, oh, I actually know you really well now. It's weird that I don't have you on Instagram, but I'm like, it doesn't matter. And when this person talked about we've neglected the care that is required to maintain relationships for too long, like watching someone's Instagram story is not care. Like I'd much rather, and I have fallen off of my long form, like letter writing to my friends and being pen pals. And I'm like, I'd much rather spend the time that I would like watching everyone's Instagram stories or having them watch mine, like just spending that time on writing to them in like a more deeper, intimate way, like more intentional, you know? And that's still digital. It's like still email. But I just mailed all my friends Valentines that I made from the Lina Cut party. And it was like, it took time. Like I had to sit down and like, it probably took an hour to even though they were tiny, they were like a playing card size. Took it like an hour to write those, to seal the envelope. I wrote something on the envelope and then, you know, marking the postage. It was like finding their addresses. It was like, but hopefully that'll feel way better than me just giving them a heart on Instagram story means. Like, then it represents, like, that doesn't mean anything. And this past few weeks, since I haven't been sharing anything on my Instagram story, and I usually love sharing my photos and my videos, I'm like, how else do I do that? And I've considered like, okay, Flickr, or like I do want to do a newsletter and have you choose to be emailed by me if you want to. I don't know actually. But anyway, I want to build a website and I want to do a newsletter. And that's just my thought right now. But I have been enjoying, we had a beautiful snow day and I went out and I took so many beautiful photos of the park that I was so proud of. And I shared them in my family messenger chat. I texted them to like 5 different friends, and seeing their reactions and their responses even over text was so lovely and enlightening. And I was like, oh, that feels so much better than if I just saw they were in my story viewers, you know? And because it was just delightful. And then I had this really like emotional day that I was like really trying to, actually, I'll talk about that next. Yay. Wait. Yay. Everything's folding into each other. I had this really emotional day and I was telling them about it. And then I was like, wait, I can show you. I have references. Like I can make this like more illustrative because I filmed clips for my next, like at some point I'll put them in a vlog in like a not just like in a collage-y way, like little supercut way. But I was able to show them the videos and they were like, wow, that park is so beautiful. Or like, wow, the way that light is shining off the water is so nice. Or like, wow, like, and getting the like in-person response was so gratifying. Here's the thing though, you can't live your social life like that if you're not hanging out with people regularly. You can't get the gratification of showing people your photos if you don't see them in real life. So I'm like, these are the fortunes and the spoils of being in relationship with me in an intentional, active way and not a passive way. And so it means that my long distance friends, like they're not going to be able to see my life unless we FaceTime or they watch my YouTube video or listen to my podcast and then text me about it. Or I send them photos, but I think I'm just going to kind of like solicit and see like who wants me to directly send them photos, because I'll do that. So I've been thinking about, okay, what if I had like a monthly, last Sunday of every month, come over and we'll do a slideshow and I'll show you all my favorite things I filmed, or like my favorite, or I'll screen my vlog. Somebody in my book club really inspired me and said that one of her friends, when he came back from a trip to Europe, screened an hour-long vlog that he had made. He wasn't a YouTuber. I mean, he is now because he made a vlog, but like he screened it for his 30 or 40 friends like it was a movie, and it was so great to hear all the reactions to it. And I'm like, I never fucking screen my YouTube videos, but I was visiting a friend who lived in like a house with YouTubers and they would all do that. And I was like, this is so bizarre because I've never done that, but like what a beautiful way and a vehicle to share your expression with people. So I've been thinking about, making like, I could print out photos and put them in a scrapbook and like show that to friends when they come over. Like just figuring that out. And like exactly what this person wrote about, like it's forcing me to conceptualize my social life without a ready-made template and something that speaks to me and my personal style. And maybe the things I'm talking about right now, you're like, I would never want to do that. But it's like, if you get off, if you divest from these things and you get off and you find your own, like, I don't think a template by itself is bad. It is convenient. And if it is the thing that gets you to do the thing, that's awesome. Like, that's why I like having a template for my severance watch party. The template is, it happens this time most weeks and sometimes it changes, but like, maybe the template is a scrapbook, maybe the template is a newsletter, maybe the template is having people over for the slideshow. Like, that's a template, but it's a template that like speaks to me. And it's more responsive and like adaptive. So thinking about that, and then thinking about that website in relationship to a couple of other quotes I read. This one is about we need to party more. I think it was like an Atlantic article that kind of made the rounds and I did enjoy it. And they said, my point is that we are obligated to create the social world we want. Intimacy, togetherness, the opposite of crushing loneliness so many people seem to feel, are what parties alchemize. Warm rooms on cold nights, so many people you love thumbtacked down in the same place. The musical clank of bottles in the recycling, someone staying late to help with the dishes. These are things anyone can have, but like everything worth having, they require effort. Fire trucks, after all, don't come from nowhere. They come because we pay taxes. And I think a lot of people, there's like a sense of like entitlement to like the convenience of DoorDash, of Amazon. But no, neither of those things are relational. In fact, they're antisocial because like most people, and I was guilty of this when I was using it too, was just like leave it at my door. No social interaction. But it's like that's robbing that person, that gig worker, of like so much humanity, you know? Like Amazon drivers are fucking peeing in bottles because they don't have bodily autonomy. They don't have time to take care of themselves. The working conditions are crushing. And I'm like, I just don't want to contribute to that. I would rather, like, not that, you know, buying my groceries from the grocery store means that those workers are being treated amazingly, but like, you know, bits and pieces. And I'm reading this article and I literally just a warm flush of comfort washed over me because I realized I did hear the clank of, not the clank of bottles as much as the rattle of like, polar seltzer cans going to the recycling. The sound of those being crushed. I did have a friend stay late. I had multiple friends stay late to do my dishes, which was so nice. And multiple people at my party took a photo of all the shoes in the front hallway. And I know we all love stunting with our full outfit, with our shoes at the party, but like it's worth taking shoes off just to see the pile at the entryway. And it was such a beautiful like representation of like how much life was in the room. Just love it. I want to make like a print or like a line of cut of like shoes at the front of my house. I think that would be such a cute like print or like an invitation. Like I have so many ideas. I'm so inspired. Like I'm genuinely so inspired. This is the first year I have not read The Artist's Way in the winter months. It's usually the way that I start my year. I've done it. I read it in fall of 2021 and then January 2022, January 2023, January 2024. And for a number of reasons I will not disclose at this time, I don't have the bandwidth to like run it this year. And I was worried. I was like, what if I like really fall into something sad or bad or low, you know, because I'm not doing that. But I still have so much inspiration in my life that I'm like, you know what? Not all is lost. I still got it. Like I still have her lessons like baked into me and I don't need to read it every single year, I think. But it also, I have a couple friends that are trying to get me to read it with them right now. So it still might happen. Okay. The other article I want to read, and hopefully, I don't know how to get the consent for this, but hopefully P.E. Moskowitz is okay with me reading excerpts and not cutting into their Substack business, the Substack economy. But they wrote about how we live in a nation of online incel loser freaks. Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, the rest of them. They are that way and they want us to be that way. And P.E. Moskowitz wrote, in the traditional understanding of plutocracy, the rich use their money to rig the system in their favor to get even more money at the expense of equality and fairness and democracy. But it has become clear to me that we are not living in a traditional plutocracy. We are living in a loser nation, a country governed by nerds and incels who have used their vast power and influence to remake their entire world into a mirror of their own sad lives. Trump winning was their victory lap, but they succeeded long before the 2024 election. What's sad is that this all has so far worked. We are more lonely than ever, largely thanks to the internet. Did you know only 4.1%, they're referencing that stat that I don't fucking believe in, 4.1% of Americans took part in a social event on any given weekend in 2023. And even worse, we've convinced ourselves that the internet is not the cause of our loneliness and rightward trajectory, that perhaps it's even the solution. Think of all the TikTokers who cried about how banning TikTok was really about censoring left-wing speech and breaking social bonds amongst progressive youth, an argument that falls flat when you consider that Gen Z is trending more conservative than liberal, and that the internet is largely responsible for this trend. The rulers of the internet have not only successfully remade our politics, they have successfully remade our psyches, convincing us via dopamine reward that there is something to be gained by posting and socializing within the confines of their rigged system. And they got me. But as soon as I feel like I am being conned, that I'm being taken advantage of, that I'm being exploited by something, that's when I get spiteful. And that's when it's much easier for me to break ties, to divest, and to fuck off, quite honestly, because I never thought that I would get to the point where I was taking a step back from social media platforms. I love posting. I love sharing myself, but I'm realizing I can no longer share myself on these platforms because they're so like demonic now. And actually love to hail Satan, but like that, the internet has just gotten to a point where I'm like, I can't even do what I used to do on here because it's no longer like aligned with my principles, you know? And I'm like, I want to be a principled. One of my principles is being principled. So this essay really scared me. Zoe Who writes, the internet is as much a cause of isolation as anything else. It promises to give men power if they forego social connections in favor, and we're talking about men because of the male loneliness crisis, the manosphere, incel shit, all that. It promises to give men power if they forego social connections in favor of hustling and misogyny. This is essentially an updated version of what has long been the Republican platform. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Individualism is manly and good. Relying on others is weak. And that's like truly antithetical to everything I've been speaking about in the first however many minutes of this podcast, of which some of them were not on microphone, but on iPhone, unfortunately. Unfortunately, I didn't screenshot the last part of this article, but they basically made a call for like, we need to stop organizing our lives on these platforms because they're slanted. And like Mark Zuckerberg is on a hateful streak and like censorship exists on these things and I just can't trust them. And they're building distrust in each other, and we need to build trust in each other because they want us to build trust in systems and to feel entitled to like, these things got me. But like, fire trucks exist because we pay taxes. Parties happen because you plan them. Like, we need to be self-possessed and realize that we have agency, even though our free will is being taken away at every opportunity. You gotta cling to the agency and make cracks in the wall and like try to like build people power, period. And P.E. Moskowitz was also, I think this P.E. Moskowitz was also writing about how there's apps monetizing the feeling of loneliness now. We have apps monetizing the feeling of grief. It's like, oh my God. Like, and speaking of grief, like I have been feeling such a surge of it this past month and at a couple of events, the ones that I met the new people at. There was a grief ritual and an exercise, and I'm going to shout out this amazing center in Seattle if you're local, called A Resting Place. It is on Instagram, but I think if you look it up on Google, they have a website too. And the website has a beautiful description of the work that they do, and I highly recommend reading it. But it is a space in Chinatown International District here that is an opportunity. It's like BIPOC led, and it invites people in to be able to experience their grief in a regular, everyday way and to have an outlet for that and for it to not be so taboo and stigmatized. And I went to an event they were at where they had built a grief wall, and it was a collection of notes and letters that people had written to a home they had lost, you know, a relationship they had lost, a person they had lost. And I really recognized myself in like so much of the writing and so much of the devastation. And I was bawling, and it was so tender because the person behind me was the artist and the, you know, instigator, the, you know, creator of it, and was like, thank you so much for stopping by. And I was like, thank you so much for making this. Like, I didn't know how much I needed to feel collectivity and grief. And even though they weren't people I was talking to, they were notes I was written. I was like, the people that wrote them were here 15 minutes ago at this table next to me. Like, they're in this room right now. And even though they're not bringing up their grief to me, you know, in other ways at this event, it's really nice to at least be able to see it this way. And I want to like, actually, I think I have been, I feel like, letting it flow more. And that's a question I asked you all this month is like, how do you experience your grief, and like, how do you let it flow? And like, when is it able to surface for you? Because I think we want it to surface less because it's painful, but like surfacing it more is it confirms your livelihood and like your place in it all in the cycle of life. I wrote in my revelations that I realized grief is so silent a lot of the time and then so loud in others. And I want to be able to speak in more normal tones about it. Like more regular tones about it. I'm feeling a lot of grief right now, and a lot of it's anticipatory, a lot of grief over like past hurt that I've experienced, my best friend that I lost, grieving for California and all of that land that was stewarded for thousands of years in the LA area by the Tongva people, and how devastating to see, you know, that ongoing project of like stewardship like really fall in so many ways. But stewardship happens and rebuilding happens, but it is just so much grief for like, wow. And of course, then I'm thinking about all the land that's being ravaged in Palestine, and thinking about the grief of like Sudan and Congo and just all of these interconnected tragedies. Grieving for people that I see on the street and how much our systems have failed them. Like, there's so much grief now and always. And I went to the event again and was able to write a note. I wrote 2 notes actually. And it was so raw to like be crying while I'm writing it, and people are like walking into the event. And like, this was just a small part of the event. So it wasn't like everyone was participating in this, but like, it was so, there were 3 tables to write at, and there was one person sitting at one at the other, and I chose to sit at the third. And I'm like, I kind of wish I had sat with another person while we were doing that. But I had some fear of each other. I had some fear of like letting someone into that, because usually I'm grieving so privately. But I was able to share the note that I wrote with 2 people who like know that side of me, or, you know, also share that grief. And that was really special. So looking forward to reading more about your experiences of grief at the end of the episode, the end of this mega episode, and thinking about grief and hurt and pain. And then also thinking about, what does healing look like? I love this new term that has surfaced, like crashing out. Like, it does represent something. And I'm like, I don't really want to crash out. Like, I don't want to do it. And I want to see how else I can heal besides getting into self-destructive patterns that, you know, sink me deeper. Like, what are adaptive ways of like coping and healing from, you know, a lot of these things that like you can't necessarily fix or change. Like, you have to sit with it, and how are you going to like express that or like exercise that? And I suffered a disappointment on one day this past week, and the next day I was really focused on like what feels uplifting to me. And I was able to bike in the morning and then during lunch, sit by the sea and journal and read a couple letters and then come back later and watch the sunset and walk along the waterfront in Seattle. And that's where I took some of those videos that I was showing my friends from that day, and visit a new park that had opened that I hadn't been able to go to yet. And then I stopped by, and then I ended up right by Pike Place. And I was like, oh, let me see if anything's open. I need to get some dinner before my open mic that was starting in like an hour. And this Mexican place was open. Then I got to practice my Spanish more. And I was like, I literally love, I love language. And it's like, it's vulnerable to practice it, but it's like a puzzle for me. It's like, it's nice to have to try to solve that puzzle with another person if they're down to practice and with me. And got a cup of champurrado. You know that shit's healing. And some tamales. And then did some errands at Target and H Mart. And then I walked to my open mic and I talked about the disappointment on stage and I crushed. And then there's always karaoke after. And I did a song that related to that disappointment and crushed at that. And my friends loved it. And then I got to laugh so much at the open mic. That was so healing. And then I got to FaceTime my friend when I got home and like just feel so seen and supported by them. And I was like, it took 8 steps. Like all in all, however many things I just mentioned, it was like 8 to 12 steps to healing that day. But I got there. Like I really I was like, that was way more inconvenient than just popping a pill. You know what I'm saying? Or, numbing out with something else, or numbing out, and like doing something like that. But it was a much more enriching way to do it. And in some ways it was unnatural. Like I was tired. I didn't want to go to the open mic, but I just knew that like expressing myself in that live medium and getting up there is so like representative of like my belief in myself, and like it's going to solidify my confidence. Like I was just so proud to know myself well enough to know what feels healing. Something I feel less sure of what feels like rest. I've been going and trying to fill up my winter with so much social interaction that I hit a wall and I wasn't getting enough sleep, and I knew I was drained, and I knew I was going to get sick. Like I knew that my baseline had dipped below a point it shouldn't have dipped to, but I was like so focused on keeping my mood up that I got sick. And then I was forced to isolate because I was like, I don't want to get my friends sick, and forced to take that time. And like then I was like full-time focused on rest because I was like, I want to get better so I can see my friends. And it felt good that I could full-time focus on rest, but I was like, why can't I part-time focus on it? Like, why is it so all or nothing with me? Like, where am I going to get it? Why is it so hard for me to pull back and like prioritize that? And I was reading this part of Haley Nauman's essay on her Substack. She references actually Jenny Odell, Saving Time, which I talked about with Kairos and Chronos. I read that book a few years ago. Remains relevant. I think that will be kind of a timeless book. Anyway, distinct from merely time off, Odell posits that true leisure exists outside the binary of working or not working, and instead concerns an attitude of mind and a condition of the soul, which is to say it doesn't automatically spring from circumstances. You can put on a face mask and get in the bath and continue to be anxious in the bath. The task doesn't define the mood. It's the other way around. This is why sometimes dinner with a friend can feel restful, while canceling to rot can leave you feeling more drained than you were before. This also explains why sometimes rotting actually does the trick, in which case maybe it's not rotting at all, but lying down. And this was so profound to me because I was like, am I just viewing rest in like a overly simplified way? Like, is spending time with my friends restful? Because I feel like we've known that rest is just like, watching TV or scrolling on your phone or doing something like mindless. But I'm like, maybe it's restful to make Valentine's. Maybe that's restful, even though I'm actively doing something. Like maybe it is restful to have a really thought-provoking conversation with a friend. Maybe that is draining though. And it's like hard to know basically like every day, like what rest feels like to me or like what's going to be restful. I feel like I'm lacking that self-knowledge of like intimately like what is going to feel restful to me right now. And it's hard for me to, like, even tonight I was like, do I feel I felt energized enough to record this episode, and I clearly was. I knew that. But the other few nights I was like, I felt really drained, and I was like, am I drained? Could I record the podcast? Would that give me energy? And I'm still in a state of like, like, what does rest look like? I will say one thing I am leaving this month. There was just one thing this time around, and it was biking without stretching. Like that form of rest or healing is really important. As someone who has scoliosis and like my back is, I have chronic pain from that. And I think I just sort of like I'd naturalized it and just sort of like disavowed that like that pain is real. But I'm like, no, like I feel pain from that. And I go to massage therapy, but I don't do the maintenance of like stretching and keeping things fluid. And so from here on forth, and today I actually did bike and I got home and I stretched immediately. And it doesn't have to be 90 minutes of stretching, 60 minutes of stretching, 30 minutes of stretching. It can just be 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 15 minutes, something to loosen it up. In an unprecedented move, I actually think I'm going to save a couple of these things for the next episode since time isn't real anymore. I just broke the illusion of basically Gregorian months. So I'm going to finish by talking about my interest in disagreeable people. I really realized that is a trait that I don't shy away from. Someone clocked me. I met someone new at my party and he clocked me for my Aries rising. He was like, do you always bump into things? And I was like, actually, yeah. And then I was thinking about Honey Pluton, who's also a fire sign. He was talking about stomping around his apartment and bumping into things. And I'm like, dude, I do that too. And from that, I have a little bit of fire in me and I like to have a little bit of friction in my relationships. And I like that friction to look like people that challenge me, that aren't afraid to challenge me, that are a little bit disagreeable. I don't like when someone's like, it's really beautiful to be seen and someone truly gets you and you just agree on a lot. And it's also really beautiful that someone trusts you enough to like know that if they disagree with you or challenge you on something, that's not going to like decay or like erode the relationship. And I've just been curious about like why I do like that. And I also think like there are limits to that. Like, can I spend a week uninterrupted with someone who's very disagreeable? Probably not. Like, we need to have a good amount in common, but it's like in short stints. That can be sexy and like appealing. And something that I'm taking that I learned from Haley Nahman again, maybe Baby on Substack, maybe it was a podcast of hers. She was talking about, or no, someone in her comments was like, the tool I use in my relationships to keep conflict more available and not be conflict avoidant is if you have an issue with someone, you can bring it up in the moment by just being like, hey, I've got a bone to pick with you. Keeping it playful, because it's like if you air it out before it's like a huge deal to you, you can keep it playful, but just being like, hey, I've got a bone to pick with you. That thing there, it's causing me trouble because of this. Or however you want to do it. And I've implemented it a couple of times and I think it's been pretty effective so far. So I'm going to float that and trial it. Okay. Whoa. That was a lot. And we'll see how many of these responses I can read before I actually need to rest. And rest is going to look like eating amazing dips from Yola in Seattle. I'm leaving some Seattle recs in this podcast episode. Let's start with the matter of the disagreeable. I asked, do you spend time with people who challenge you in any way? Whether ideologically, conversationally, lifestyle-wise, how do they do it and do you enjoy it? Because also I think it's like people that challenge you can like push you forward and open you up. It's kind of the angle I was coming at it from. Okay, sorry. I usually don't read stuff from the anything else to add column on the pod because I feel like usually you guys write it just for me, but someone said, I've been listening to the back catalog of Revelatorium on and off for the past week, and it almost feels too rich somehow since it's not intended to be experienced more than once a month. Like you literally, there's a warning. There's like there's a warning label, like do not consume Revelatorium more than once a month. Like it's actually it's too dense. It's like, yeah, when you eat something that's really rich, it's like you can't even eat the whole cake slice because you're like, it's way too rich. Like a lava cake, hot lava cake, sometimes it's too rich. I love that she also said her pronouns are she for now. Real. She was like, not to be dramatic, but this has inspired some deep reflection and maybe changed my life. I'm like, hopefully. Like, honestly. Anywho, back to the disagreeable question of people that challenge you. Annie, who's 33 in her flat in Budapest/Hungary, said, well, for me as an autistic person, every single conversation is challenging. And that truly shook me because I feel like conversation is a gift of mine. And if every single one felt like there was some sort of like barrier to it, that would be like really cumbersome. Zaneb, who's 29 in Toronto, said, I want to spend time with people who challenge me, but I live in Canada. People avoid any conversation with potential disagreement on a topic, sadly. Everyone is just avoidant and passive and wants to keep things nice. Unsure these are my people, if I'm going to be honest. I feel like you can still find people, like, I know some Canadians that are very disagreeable. Let's just say that. Little guy who forgot to drink enough water today and is 27 in the plant-filled corner of their apartment, Monstera Forward, said, one of my best friends is the conversational challenger, and I love her dearly. Her opinions are almost all strongly held, and she will step up to the plate no matter how large or even trivial the subject matter. I often find myself chewing on bits and pieces of our dialogue in the weeks and months after the discussion, and this is one of the most enriching parts of our friendship. That said, like all good things, sometimes you got to undertake these conversations in moderation so that not all interactions go toe-to-toe. It's not that we're always on opposing sides ideologically or anything, but if I don't consciously hold the reins, it can be a slippery slope from casual dialogue into friendly conversational jousting. To the beginning part of this, I also feel like the people that I can think of that challenge me politically like more radically. I also am chewing on things they brought up with me many months ago. It's like, I think that's a quality of it for sure. Tyler, who's 27 in Sacramento, said, yeah, they challenge me. They challenge my patience. I'm like, for fucking sure. Depending on the type of challenge, it could just be your patience. Farah, who's 21 in the washroom at her parents' house, said to the question of, do people challenge you? Yes, I feel like for the most part, my friends and I are very aligned in our values, but they approach life very differently than I do sometimes, and I appreciate pushback from them on my perspectives. I feel like I'm very open-minded, so when someone I trust rebuts my argument with theirs, I'm super willing to hear them out. I also feel like the YouTubers I watch are mainly commentary YouTubers, and they're constantly providing so many perspectives on how to interpret a situation, which I really enjoy because I feel like it gives me a well-rounded perspective on the world and what's going on within it. I will say that there's some beliefs that I'm unmoving on because I've done my own learning about them and know more definitively where I stand. For example, I'm very pro-Palestine and nothing will change my mind on that. But so are all my friends because I wouldn't be friends with someone who didn't align with me on those core values. Certainly. Rich, who's 20 in LA, said, not necessarily challenging, yet I have become a member of an already existing friend group. Navigating that socially has been really interesting. It's also been a good reminder to listen and also check myself and that I have to still keep up some mystery about myself. I've been enjoying it so far. Such a fascinating dynamic. Like, I can't think of like a friend group that I've like entered that was like already pre-formed, but well, actually no. I did find myself in that position. And I had to really like relax my expectations of like where it would end up. But like it's a social dynamic challenge, and that's beautiful. Stella, who's 31, who's writing in from her bed at an ungodly hour, said, yes and no, I spend time with people who challenge me. If it's a person I admire, my insecurity creeps up. What if they measure me and I won't hold any weight? I don't want to be found lacking to a person I admire. My views, my ideas might not measure up. They're still a winner or a loser when it comes to challenges, I think. Yeah, and part of the reason I like people that challenge me is sometimes I feel like ideologically they are more advanced than me in that like they have more experience and they have done more reading. And I'm like, I want to be challenged by someone like me. If they can air out something I'm ignorant about, I'm like, I do want to like become less ignorant. So like, I think that's a valuable part of it. Leah, who's writing in from a frozen lake in Canada and is 28, said, one of my best friends is a midwife and can't wait to have her own children one day, whereas I'm extremely child-free and don't really like kids at all, nor do I enjoy talking about birth and babies. But since this is her profession, she speaks about these topics at length. I am inspired by her love for the next generation and also sometimes feel morally deficient due to my nihilistic views about not having children. I do enjoy our conversations, but I also long to be understood by someone else who feels the way I do about procreation. Summer, who's 28, nearly 28, in Seattle, said, I do spend time with people that challenge me. My friends have different expectations for going out, and since I am mostly sober, don't fit in with their expectations of drinking/being casual with drugs. I frequently feel peer pressured, which is ironic because media is pressing this idea of comfortability with being sober curious. Guess word hasn't spread to everyone. Certainly not, and damn, peer pressured. It's interesting because like I've always, like I talked about one episode of like always been a friend to stoners, but I never felt pressured by them. And I was because they always just knew that wasn't a part of something I wanted to try and that I would ask for it when I wanted it. So that is tough. And I don't like it when people challenge me on like something as important as like sobriety, because addiction and recovery are like a hell of a thing to deal with. So it's like, if you feel any reticence about that, I just feel like you shouldn't be pushed, you know? I actually had a doctor growing up that like pushed me and was like, thought I was missing out by like not experimenting. And I just was so rubbed the wrong way by that. Doesn't matter who it is, even if it's someone with an MD. Cassie, who's 23, writing in from Dallas, said, I love to hang out with people who are smarter than me, who reference books I've never read and ideology I don't grasp. I also hang out with people who can drink much more than me and stay up later. A couple or both. Love. But also it's rare for me to meet someone who can stay up later than I can. I feel like I keep my energy somehow afloat. Okay, now I actually just want to read leaving. What are people leaving behind in this month, whatever the month is, because I've redefined what my Revelatorium calendar. Imagine if I met you guys. I think I need to make a Revelatorium calendar. I think I do. I've never wanted to have merch because I don't want to like have people create waste, but I like having a calendar every year, and it would be so cool if I could create my own. But maybe it wouldn't be super Gregorian. Maybe it would be something else. I'm thinking about it. If you have ideas, let me know. What are you leaving in January? Emma, who's 29 in New York City, said most of it, LOL. Real as fuck. January was brutal. Farah again said, the idea of not burning bridges with people who really hurt me. I feel like there's an emphasis in the job world to never burn bridges, which I'm hearing a lot about now that I'm in my last semester of university. But I just feel like doing this in some ways takes away from my ability to stand up for myself and how I want to be treated, even if it costs me a job. I'm like, the whole burning bridges thing, is that not just like a psyop? Like, is that not just like propaganda for like, be more compliant and like treat us better and like be more subservient to the corporate world? It's like, no, if you're being fucking mistreated, like stand up and say that. And like, I don't know. I just think that this must like like unless you work in like a really small industry, I just feel like you can always start anew and like, you know, hopefully people aren't like literally black. I don't know. I'm just like, I don't know. I don't know that I believe in burning bridges like you're saying. Like, I think you're right to be skeptical of it. A little guy who forgot to drink enough water today said, they're leaving my boring ass normie hair. recently a shag convert. And it's so true that like, it's nice when you don't have normie hair, because then if your wardrobe is still normie and that's not something you want, at least the hair communicates that like, no, it's not quite adding up. Okay. And now what are people taking? Olivia in Salt Lake City said, my dear neighbor friend, I've had a slow burn friendship building with a neighbor down the street who also spends most of her time home. She cares for her partner's dad and I work from home. Caretakers are so special and so important. For months, we just chit-chat when we ran into each other on walks with our cats. Okay, cat walkers. But these last few weeks, we went out to lunch. I cooked for her, and she took me to urgent care because of some issues with my period. I've been wanting a friendship like this for so long, and I'm so grateful I have it. And hold tight to that gratitude. Like, it really is special to find people who really align with, like, what we've wanted and what we've desired. It's like, and you made that happen by pouring in the time. So, like, celebrate turning towards each other instead of turning away. I'm reading so much from this little guy who forgot to drink water, but she said, taking homemade brown butter weed cookies made with love for future me. Let me open up a P.O. box because I need some of those sent to my house. That sounds amazing. The girl with the fancy ass couch, who's 28 in Seattle, said she's taking hosting, both parties and casual hangs, also being more bold with dating. Rejection is no big deal anymore. Might as well ask the question. Totally. And sometimes rejection can be softer than you imagine. Mia, who's 23, writing in from a Wabakal country, also known as Australia. And I got to give it up to my folks down under. I don't know if Kiwis consider themselves that, but like people from Aotearoa and Awaba, like I don't know the indigenous name for like Australia, like that island, but let me look it up. It says there's no single Aboriginal word for Australia. The Merriam word for mainland Australia is Keodudai. Anyway, folks there really know what land they're on. I don't know what the land back movements look like there. I would love to learn about that. But anyway, just something of note that I've noticed as I've done this podcast is like those folks always write in the indigenous name. Anyway, Mia is taking a shorter fringe. I'm like, I love the hair changes. Farah said, getting involved in different forms of activism. I recently went to a paint night at my university hosted by a club for Palestine and the Visual Arts Club where they taught people about how art can be used as a form of resistance. I also want to get involved in painting for the fun of it. At the paint night, we made colorful backgrounds and carved out shapes of poppies with black paint. The president of the Visual Arts Club said something that really stuck with me. She said that this might not be beautiful to a lot of people, but she asked why art has to be beautiful. So I'm taking the idea of ugly art with me into February. Allison, who's 28 and a half, and is someone who also celebrates half birthdays. I'm someone where my half birthday is in August, but her half birthday is in February. And she does a tea party in February. I'm like, I hate having a February birthday, so I'm trying to celebrate my birthday in August. Anyway, she's writing in from Grand Rapids, Michigan. And she's taking submerging myself in Lake Michigan, even and especially in the winter. I did my first ever cold plunge with a pal on New Year's Day, and after a pretty bleak New Year's Eve, it was exactly what I needed. Running into a body of water never fails to reset me to factory settings. More water in February. And I'm trying to do the same. Tanya, who's 34, writing in from Europe, said, being bolder and telling people openly that I want to see them / spend time with them. Cassie said, being a regular at the coffee shop and honestly communicating my needs. James, who's writing in from the front row of my thermodynamics lecture and is 20, said being more open to scary / new emotions and experiences. Amazing to do that from the front row because everyone behind you can see that you're filling out this shit. Now with the bone to pick of it all, I asked you all, when you have a bone to pick, how likely are you to address it? Have you found successful ways of doing so? Spill. I said, like, specifically when something your friend does bothers you. And James said, I bring it up straight up. We have enough understanding that it's not out of ill intent. It's out of care for our own boundaries. I think oftentimes people can receive, criticism and it hurts their ego. But it's like, I am telling you that this thing is bothering me because I want to spend more time with you, not because I want to not know you. Summer said, I would say 60% likely that I'll address it. I prefer to discuss the issue with a mutual friend first to gauge whether or not I am overreacting / deflecting. And if I feel like my feelings are validated, then I will talk to the offending friend about it. It feels most successful if I bring up the issue while the subject is already being discussed / action is being displayed. And yeah, it can be really affirming when someone else sees the same thing you see, like they recognize the pattern. But I also am like, I'm wondering the ethics of talking about your friendship with another person, with like talking about a conflict with a friend that also knows that friend. I don't know. I've just been thinking about that. I don't think it's bad or good. I'm just like wondering if that is something that my friends would be okay with. Leah said, very few things that my friends do bother me. I struggle a bit with being spineless and people-pleasing, but also I do not feel like I am the authority on what is good / bad or right or wrong. Usually if something bothers me, I usually assume there is a deficiency in myself, for better or for worse. Tough. And I think you may find, well, I don't know. I think that's a coping mechanism for sure. And it's like, if you stop thinking of yourself as deficient, it might open up more conflict. Stella said, I address it with them privately like my mom taught me. Praise in public, scold in private. Okay, mom wisdom. Clover, who's writing in from her freezing living room in Montreal, that's 24, said, or her living room's not 24, she is. I don't know how old her living room is. She said, sweep it under until it's happened a 5th time and then freak out. JK. Depends on what they do, but in general, I think sooner rather than later. And playfully versus serious, if appropriate. Yes, that's what the bone to pick does, is achieves playful nature. And she also said, one time my friend FaceTimed me out of nowhere and said I was a shit long distance friend and it was a super heavy convo when maybe it could have been a nudge 2 months prior asking for more memes or something. But maybe festering intensity can be good for friendships. And is it a behavior they can really change? Or they just have annoying mannerisms or reacted poorly in a situation? I feel like everyone should get a few annoying AF passes. And then after 3 strikes, you pick which one sucked the most and gently chat about it. Maybe that's bad. I think there are some things that like, they don't bother you enough that it's worth opening up the conflict. And maybe it's just something that you can loosen up on. But I don't like when people sit on resentment. Resentment is drinking the poison and expecting the other person to die. E, who's in the Midwest and is 28, said, many of my friends bother me because they don't wear masks as often as I think is safe. I don't bring it up because I don't feel like it will matter to them. That's like a very genuinely hard conversation to have. And I actually feel like I'd appreciate it if someone like was like, hey, your mask politic is kind of slipping and it's like not okay. I think I would appreciate that. So just to give you one perspective of someone who like, if brought up in the right way and it was in good faith, like I would want to hear it. SM, who's writing in from West Virginia and is 29, said, I have a close friend I chat with regularly. We met during a study abroad program in South America and then traveled around together afterwards and have remained very good friends ever since. However, it bothers me that she often talks about her best friend who treats her poorly, making demeaning comments and acting inconsiderate. Too many examples to list here. Despite this, my friend remains loyal to her because they've known each other since childhood. I don't agree with their dynamic and don't understand her loyalty anymore. I want her to feel comfortable sharing this with me, but I'm unsure how to. I want her to feel comfortable sharing with me, but I'm unsure how to express that I don't want to hear about this person anymore because it bothers me. I'm big on boundaries and self-respect, and I feel irritated that she stays in this unhealthy friendship just because of longevity. 100% say it, because like if I was going on and on about how much I hate this relationship that I'm in and how stuck I feel, and someone was like, dude, I'm fed up with this. And not that that's the way you'd want to present it, but like if someone were like, I'm fed up with hearing about this, I actually really love you, but like I am at a point where like I'm not able to hear this anymore and like you're going to have to speak with someone else about this, I'd be like, damn. You know, like that would like really cause me to be like, wow, my shit's rocked. I need to like think about changing some things, you know? Like I've gotten into a moment with a friend like this before where I was like, I have heard you say this refrain many times, and like and I actually talked to my therapist about it. I was like, I love you very much, and like it's just not something that like I'm willing to like speak about more with you, because I just don't feel like I'm able to present anything new, and like that I'm able to be helpful, and that I just don't feel like it's like the way that I want to be in relationship with you, you know? Farah said, if something my friend does bothers me, I usually feel it in the moment, but don't realize the extent to which it bothers me until it's been at least a couple days. And I feel like I've been trying to close the gap on like, I want to be able to like be more in active conflict and not like let things like simmer so much, but it really is hard to like close that gap. Okay, I did want to read this one conflict that she's having. Recently, my friend moved into the house I'm also living in. There's a total of 6 roommates now, including me and her, and we each rent our own rooms. The roommates in general rarely run into each other because of work schedules and such, which is to say people are usually very disconnected from what other people in the house are doing. So when she had her boyfriend over, I'm not even kidding, 2.5 months straight, I was trying to figure out if I even had the right to be upset since all the other roommates were so uninvolved in each other's lives. Important context is he was also her ex at one point and really did her dirty, so I actually strongly dislike him, but aside from that, it was also just suffocating to have someone who didn't live at the house around so consistently. She's been through bad situations with roommates in the past who have overstepped in many ways, so I didn't want to contribute to that, but one day I came home to see his shoes on the shoe rack for probably the 70th day in a row, and I just saw red. I debated moving out and paying rent $300 higher than what I currently pay just to not deal with the situation anymore. And I was talking to a handful of friends about it constantly because it was affecting my mental health to not be able to de-stress even at home. One day I was talking to a friend on FaceTime about it, and while she was at her friend's house and her friend on FaceTime about it, what the fuck? One day I was talking to a friend on FaceTime about it while she was at her friend's house, and her friend had once been the girl with her boyfriend over constantly. She encouraged me to say something about it because she said it would be likely for the best anyway, since that was the case in her experience, but to send it as a text instead of dropping it on her in person so my friend had some time to sit with it before responding. They helped me draft a message and encouraged me to send it. It went well, and he's over a lot less, thank God. All that's to say it varies, but I definitely bring stuff up if it affects me enough, because a conversation usually results in a better outcome in my experience. And if you're considering moving out, definitely. The girl with the fancy ass couch said, a year ago, I would completely suppress it to keep the peace, and I had no idea I was doing it. I went through a period where I was finally starting to feel my feelings, but I had no idea how to express the not so easy ones. And I had not yet realized that my exceptionally agreeable nature had attracted the most conflict-averse people. So my 2 closest friends completely abandoned me when I started to speak up for myself. With one, we're working on repair, and I believe we'll get there. That's a real, like a lot of times we think like people pleasing has no victims or like has no consequences because it's like a kind thing to do, but it's like that is one of the limitations of people pleasing, is that when you're ready to be more full about your range of emotions and the ways in which people are not pleasing you and you're not willing to please people, it might shake out some folks that haven't found themselves in a position to enter into conflict. And that's inherent. Conflict is predictably going to be in a relationship if you're knowing each other deep enough and long enough. Okay. We're going to finish off with, what is your relationship like to grief these days? Where do you get to air it out? Is it privately, or do you share that part of yourself with others? Leah said, this past month, I cried for the first time in 4 years due to my long-term foster dog being adopted. I work from home by myself, and she was the only witness to my daily life, my rituals and routines and unmasked self. Now that she is gone, I am completely alone with no witnesses to my life on a daily basis. This is freeing in some ways, but also profoundly lonely. I've kept this grief mostly to myself, as it doesn't sound very sad when I say it out loud, but it's hard to describe. I broke down crying in front of my partner, which was really out of my comfort zone, and I felt humiliated since I'm usually very composed. Upon reflection, I am grateful for this grief because I thought I was maybe losing my emotional depth. And grief really does expand the range of like what you're able to feel, and sometimes we're resentful about that because we don't want to feel those depths, but it's like that's a part of the cycle of life. And I understand And also being composed is like not like a virtue. You know, it's like we should be able to be emotionally free. And a lot of times experiencing something and then lose, like having an experience, like I remember when I used to go on group trips and like I was around my friends constantly, it provoked a feeling of loneliness when I got back because I was like, I want that. I want to be around people more often. But that feeling was so important to sit with because it led me to like build more social life here and like reinvest more in my like life, my social life here. And it's interesting because I was with some friends the other night and I was like, why do none of my friends in Seattle like have pets when like that's such a common, like very few of them have pets when that's such a common thing in Seattle. And then I realized like, and I think one thing that's true is that like if you're living on your own, if you're living alone and you don't have a pet, it means you must have like a semi-functioning social life because usually I've been asking myself, like, is it possible to get a dog or a cat and live alone and not have loneliness be a part of the motivation? And even as I've asked people that do have pets, they're kind of like, no, like the loneliness is a part of it because it's like, that's like, yeah, you get to have a full-time witness to your life. And when you lose that, it's like, that's really convenient. And it's more inconvenient to like build relationships and like build more witnesses. But I think that grief will lead you towards something affirming. SM said, I used to listen to purging songs, which are very sad songs that evoke tearful frenzies to cry and release grief. Kind of like smoking a cigarette, binging, or drinking excessively to self-soothe. I would get upset and cry to sad songs for maybe an hour and have a swollen, puffy face the next day. These days, I no longer find that helpful because it keeps me stuck in certain memories and negative loops. Now I prefer swimming, where I can move, meditate, and process my thoughts and emotions, which helps me feel better, or listen to a song in the car and drive around a bit, which is also nice. I'm a kinetic processor and need to move to process my emotions. And that's one example of healing. I'm like, I love that you found the form of healing that works best for you. Farah said, I was actually talking to my therapist about this a couple sessions ago, but I think about death constantly. No one in my life has even died. This was such an interesting response I'd never considered, and I wanted to share it. No one in my life has even died, but I spend so much of the day grieving the possibility of their death, often against my will. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night filled with a deep panic and sadness at the idea of losing my parents, friends, or siblings. My best friend experiences the same thing, though I don't think it's to the same degree as me, but no one significant for either of us has actually passed away. It's weird and something I'm trying to let go of because it holds me back. Often. For example, a reoccurring thought I have is, I can't move away because what if while I'm gone, my mom passes away and I never get to be with her during her last moments? That's real as fuck. My parents constantly talked about death while we were growing up and low-key guilt tripped us with it whenever we would do something they didn't like. So it definitely has to do with the dread they instilled in me as a result. But yeah, it's weird. I feel like I'm constantly grieving things I haven't lost yet. Anticipatory grief. I only really started opening up about this recently because I was barely conscious of its abnormality. I thought I just had extra anxiety around it, not that people don't normally think about it this much. It causes me a lot of stress, and for the most part, I deal with that privately, but I've been trying to work through it in therapy because it has become nearly unbearable. I just can't wrap my mind around death and the idea of never seeing something or someone I love ever again, or even the fact that one day I will die. I just don't get it. Yeah. Like that's heavy, but I'm like, these are just things that we're just not able to share. And I'm like, it shouldn't be taboo and it shouldn't be stigmatized. And I'm glad that you have a best friend that gets it. And I'm glad you're talking to your therapist, and like, I had no idea it was possible to live like that. Alicia, who's 24, wrote in from her corporate office in Glendale, California, and said, grief is my old friend. It's been a little over 6 years since one of my best friends was murdered. Early on, I was so overwhelmed with grief, I would air it out anywhere, anytime, with anyone. I've since learned the hard way that not everyone deserves to have that part of me, and I've also learned healthier ways to cope. Nonetheless, I'm very open about my grief and share it when prompted, but often I just share it with my close friends. It feels as much a part of me as my right shoulder. Oof. And like, I think that was a part of the origin story for A Resting Place, the grief center I was talking about, was that he had lost someone in a very, I can't remember the word he used for it, but like, to lose someone to murder is like a very violent way to lose someone. And like, that's so important to find people who can understand what toll that might take on you. Some people are saying they only get to air it out with like a romantic partner. Some people are saying just a few friends. And I think it's true that like there's some people that don't know grief. They haven't met it. And so it's like foreign to them. And so it's like, but when I have met someone who has really grieved, and as we get older, it's going to be most people you meet, there is this recognition. Made in Yana, formerly Humane Connection, who's 24, writing in from her desk while making my second zine, said, I experienced grief through a friend who just lost his mother. I guess I am grieving him and his well-being, and everything he could have been if he took better care of himself. I hope someday to meet the healthy, thriving version of him. I definitely think I will. He's just taking a detour, but he'll get there. And that is like really profoundly true, is that like grief can be such a huge departure from like your usual self. And like there was someone in my Patreon book club that described the experience of like losing a parent as like psychedelic. Like it literally takes you on like a journey, and it can make you feel like you're walking away from people in your life. But also it can bring you closer if people really show up and support you. And it's true that it does suck to see someone really lose himself in that and not have outlets for it. And I don't know if this person is in a grief support group, but I would really encourage everyone to find that if you feel like you don't have spaces to talk about it with your existing relationships, and that you want like maybe a more regular touch point to interact with that. Olivia in Salt Lake City said, this isn't about me, but I have a friend that's in a death club where they process grief. They discuss grief more often and openly than anyone I know. This friend is a dedicated activist to saving the Great Salt Lake, and there's a lot of grief they deal with when assigned to stay on the land that is becoming more toxic due to what becomes uncovered as the lake dries up. They think they plan on staying here regardless of what happens, and sees himself dying here because of it. I had no idea that that was happening in the Salt Lake area, and that feels devastating to me. Preston, oh my God, you guys. 26 in Michigan, he said, this is what it was like to read the grief wall. And I'm like, I'm making a little grief wall here. It's like, I didn't quite make it. I didn't invite you guys to like write letters to that person, but like, oh my God, I would highly encourage you to do it. He said, my favorite person passed away when I was around 10, and I think I was too young to fully process that grief. But recently it's been coming up for me again. She was my great grandma, a fiercely independent woman, extremely mobile and hardworking for her age. I'm like, damn, I love that. So I'm like, that's really inspiring. Kept an immaculate house and garden, the kind of elder I want to be. She smoked a lot while big tobacco buried the dangers, and all my life had a hole in her throat to breathe and a strained voice. She was the strongest person I knew. Lived alone, had plenty of friends, and was beloved. She was tough. No one got away with drinking all of their cereal milk around her. Not a drop wasted. You cleaned your plate. I could go on for hours about her. One thing that's complicated for me is that as a queer person, I can't help but wonder how she would have reacted to my coming out. It's a weird feeling to not have known her at an age where I was able to discern that. As a small kid in the Midwest, I didn't even know being gay existed at that age. I have hoped she would have accepted me, but you can never know. With someone from that time period, it hurts that I'll never know the answer, but maybe it's better I didn't find out. I don't know. I think she would have accepted me, but I was so young. How well did I really know her? I've been dealing with this grief by writing, creating a story with a character based off her, revisiting the places she lived, and talking to my grandparents about her. learning the things I missed. I've cried, but it's been a rewarding process. I hope I get to share the story with my grandparents one day. I love that you are writing and making it a fictional narrative story. And like, I think that can be so healing. It's to like not allow the grief to be like so one-sided, but like she's on the other side of a door and like you're able to open that door a little bit by writing. And this is like, when I was reading the grief wall, like this really struck me that there's like these questions that are like unanswered because like the relationship is no longer active. And I have like, there's these fears around like, for me, it's like, would we still spend as much time together? Would we still adore each other the same way? Would we still be friends? Would we still have a similar intimacy? Like, that is like such like a intricate, like specific part of grief. And maybe I'll just end the episode by saying that first of all, crying is self-soothing, and I will never again apologize for doing it. It was such a trope on YouTube to be like, I'm so sorry, I didn't want to cry. And it's like, that is literally part of the healing, is like allowing yourself to cry, if that's coming for you. And yeah, I've been grieving. I don't know why, just like, I've been like re-grieving a really painful experience I had in my youth, and I've had to like confront it again, and it's been really hard. And I think sometimes healing comes to us in like really mysterious ways. And I had a dream like last week that gave me like so much closure and gave me, just true healing. That's the only word I have for it. Like I woke up and I felt like really healed. And even though the dream didn't change the material circumstances of the situation, it was just like beautiful that like my subconscious or like my psyche could like give me some relief from it, even for that time. Ooh, I am going to leave this episode here. Thank you so much for bearing witness to me, and would love you to go witness a stranger, a loved one, a neighbor, a comrade, someone else in your life. Truly so important to turn towards each other. And sometimes I found that like we want to share our inner world and we want to share what we're preoccupied by. And I love asking my friends like, what's been on your mind? And that question reveals so much more than just what happened to you this week or what's the update on that situation. And sometimes they'll surprise you, and sometimes they don't have anything. I think there's times where we want to talk to our friends about the grief that we're feeling and some of these more complicated feelings. And we use references to get there. Oh, I saw this TikTok that made me think about this, or I read this article. And I don't know, I'm just hoping that maybe this episode could be a thing for you to like, if you want to talk to your friends about grief, you could be like, I was listening to this podcast episode and, they were opening up about grief or whatnot. And it made me think about this. And like, I create these prompts and I really, truly hope that you are prompting the people in your life to like share more of themselves with you, because we need to uplift each other. And I forgot about this is the last thing I'll say, truly. That's what I need to get a tattoo that just says this is the last thing I'll say, because it's just like something I say because I don't want to overstay my welcome, basically. But anyway, last thing I'll say is that like my friend came up with this really cute idea for like my next gathering or my next party to have like a little goodie bag or a little souvenir or a little stamp that basically is just like, if I have one a month, showing up to it could be a celebration of like, I made it through March. I graduated from April. Like, I'm still here. I'm still living. Like, and letting maybe instead of like a podcast episode every month, I can have a gathering every month that is like a signifying event of like time is passing and we are still here, and like we are here to celebrate like literally graduating 1 month. Like, it's such an accomplishment to like stay here and like stay fighting and still resist what is, you know, disabling us and whatnot. So thank you so much for listening or watching. I will see you all next time, and Kat, thru out.